The series begins with Sauron's first attempt to seize power after the fall of Morgoth. He introduces a new era for the orcs, reviving them under his command. Sauron offers them a vision of power that transcends flesh, though he warns that many will perish in the process, leaving the orcs deep in thought. He promises the enslavement of Middle-earth to create a perfect order where he will rule supreme alongside the orcs. However, his vision is met with skepticism, and one orc attempts to assassinate him. Sauron swiftly quashes the attempt, daring anyone else to challenge him.
I am your only future! Who among you dare say otherwise?
None do for now. Adar, the father of the orcs, decides that rather than crown Sauron as the new Dark Lord, he would rather stab him with the sharp ends of what Sauron believed would be his crown. This act throws everything into chaos, and the orcs overwhelm Sauron with repeated stabs. Though Sauron fights back, he is vastly outnumbered and eventually succumbs. As Adar approaches to confirm his demise, Sauron releases an apocalyptic ice beam, freezing the entire area in a thick mist. When Adar regains consciousness, Sauron's body is gone. Adar, seizing the moment, takes the crown to the cheers of the orcs, whom he just declared free. Sauron, reduced to a strange, bug-like liquid, flows through cracks in the rocks, forming a pool that attracts a hungry rat. Instead of becoming prey, Sauron devours the rat, gaining strength as he consumes other insects in his path. He oozes down a snowy mountain, eventually falling onto the wheel of a passing cart. The sludge kills the cart driver, and Sauron re-emerges in the form of Halbrand, the malevolent identity he once used when he met Galadriel at the start of the first season. Sauron, now in human form, seems to appreciate his new appearance. He makes camp in the wilderness for the night, but the anger of betrayal burns in his eyes. Welcome to Cephastock Movie Recaps. Today we delve into the details of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 2, Episode 1-4. If you're new to this channel, please do subscribe and let us know where you're watching from in the comments section. Your support is greatly appreciated, my dear friend. Thank you. The next day, Sauron encounters a group of refugees fleeing chaos in the Southlands. One of the men, bearing the crest of the region's long-displaced king, befriends Sauron. The old man warns him that death awaits wherever he's headed and suggests Sauron join them in seeking safety and a new beginning.
Choice is yours, friend.
The refugees board a ship and Sauron joins them. However, a creature begins stalking the ship. While the Southlander offers Sauron advice on morality, telling him to choose life and goodness, Sauron senses something amiss. Suddenly, the creature smashes the ship to pieces, crushing the Southlander beneath the wreckage. As the man begs for help, Sauron coldly takes the crest from his neck and leaves him to die. The creature dismantles the ship, sending Sauron plunging into the sea. Facing the creature as it attacks, Sauron manages to divert it and swims to the surface, clinging to the remains of the ship where he finds the surviving refugees. As he inspects the crest of the Southland kings, they hear someone calling for help. Galadriel, who had defied her king's order to return to Valinor and stayed behind to continue her search for Sauron. The story picks up from where Season 1 left off, after the forging of the 3 rings of power to save the elves from fading. Galadriel, now on horseback, chases after Elrond, trying to recover the 3 rings forged by the elven smith Celebrimbor. Knowing that Halbrand is actually Sauron, Galadriel has good reason to be suspicious, even if she hasn't yet shared her concerns. The chase leads both Galadriel and Elrond to the court of Gil-galad, the High King of the Elves.
From him and Celebrimbor.
Gil-galad, understandably, demands answers regarding the rumors about Halbrand's true identity. When the truth is revealed, tensions erupt. Elrond and Galadriel argue fiercely, with the central question being whether Sauron has somehow corrupted the rings of power or if they are powered by pure elvish magic. Erring on the side of caution, Elrond refuses to hand over the rings to the High King, even when commanded to do so.
Must be destroyed.
He insists they must be destroyed, despite the risk that the elves' limited time in Middle-earth can only be extended by the ring's power. Galadriel urges him to obey, but Elrond defies her and leaps off a waterfall with the rings in his possession. Gil-galad immediately orders his guards to search for him. Meanwhile, in Mordor, Mount Doom continues to rumble as Adar consolidates his control over the region by enslaving the humans. Among them is Sauron, though Adar doesn't recognize him, seeing only a weak man claiming to be the king of the Southlands. Adar kills those who refuse to swear loyalty, while those who do are branded with his mark. Halbrand, still playing the role of the Southlands king, demands freedom for his people in exchange for information on Sauron's whereabouts. After successfully manipulating Galadriel, Sauron now tries the same with Adar. Adar, skeptical but intrigued, seeks to extract information from Halbrand without honoring his request for his people's freedom. Confident that Sauron is dead, Adar applies pressure to the so-called king. Elsewhere, the Easter continues his journey with Nori, searching for the stars. He dreams of a branch he repeatedly tries to grab, and Nori notices he's been having the same dream over and over, suspecting it's a clue to what they're seeking.
Maybe it's a clue.
Unfortunately, they are being followed by masked figures in disguise. As their journey continues, it seems they are moving in circles and soon they run out of food. Nori suggests the Easter use his magic to create sustenance, despite its unreliability.
Oh no.
Reluctantly, he asks her to stand back as he attempts a spell. The magic backfires, blasting the Easter away, but they manage to retrieve some bugs within a wrecked tree which becomes their food. Though the food sustains them for a while, the Easter grows frustrated with his inability to control his magic. Nori encourages him to keep trying as they share a moment discussing their homes, Nori missing hers and the Easter longing for a home he doesn't remember.
Can't remember, or even name.
When they realize they're being followed, they extinguish their fire and move on.
Followed.
Back in Mordor, Sauron is imprisoned, chained within reach of a hungry warg. He endures the taunts of Waldreg, the Southlander who betrayed his people to serve Adar. Waldreg mocks Sauron's suggestion that Adar will never free him until he reveals Sauron's location. Sauron, unfazed, takes the meat Waldreg offers and using his skill in manipulation, bends the warg to his will. In a far sunnier corner of Middle-earth, Elrond seeks refuge with Kildan, one of the eldest elves and known for his wisdom and reliability. Kildan, who oversees the crafting of elvish ships, notices something unusual as the sun sets.
You needn't hide any longer.
Elrond reveals himself, holding the rings behind his back.
What have you brought here?
Meanwhile, Galadriel and Gil-galad agree that Celebrimbor must be warned immediately, and they form an alliance of convenience, united by their shared desire to destroy Sauron and recover the rings. Galadriel insists to the High King that she will not rest until Sauron is defeated once and for all.
I swear to you, High King.
As their conversation continues, the guards return, having failed to find Elrond along the waterfall. Gil-galad orders them to widen the search, but Galadriel, ever the wise commander, suspects that Elrond may have sought out someone he trusts, likely an elder. Her intuition proves correct. Elrond has indeed sought the counsel of Kildan, relying on his wisdom to resolve the problem by destroying the rings. Though Kildan warns that doing so will signal the end of the Age of the Elves, Elrond believes there is no other choice, and Kildan agrees to take the rings out to sea and dispose of them himself. In the middle of their discussion, they hear horses approaching. It's Gil-galad and Galadriel. Before forcefully arresting Elrond, Galadriel attempts to reason with him, asking him to trust her and hand over the rings. Elrond insists that the rings may already be tainted by Sauron and must be destroyed. However, Galadriel soon realizes that the rings are no longer with Elrond but with Kildan, who has already set sail to dispose of them.
Where are the rings?
Even as incorruptible as Kildan seems, he finds himself struggling to resist the call of the rings when they accidentally spill out during the journey. In the desert, the Easter and Nori become aware they're being followed and decide to set a booby trap to catch or possibly kill their stalker. Nori waits at the top of a cliff with a rope, and when the stalker falls into their trap, they are shocked to discover it's Poppy. Nori is thrilled to see her, having sorely missed her friend, and even the Easter welcomes her arrival for two reasons. She brings food and she clues them in that they've been going in circles. Poppy also brings Sadoc's map, which contains hints from the Harfoot walking song that could guide them in the right direction. The map leads them toward Rh禦n, a mysterious land.
This is only the beginning.
Nori sees it as the beginning of their journey, while the Easter realizes it's the place he has been dreaming about all along. Meanwhile, the real stalkers, masked figures of death, continue to pursue them step by step. Back in Mordor, Sauron remains imprisoned, still in chains. Adar, however, decides to free the Southlanders and shares a story of when he first met Sauron. He recalls how Sauron once offered him wine, trying to win his allegiance. Halbrand, whom Adar knows by that name, tells him that Sauron has returned in a new form, which is technically true. Halbrand also promises to gain the trust of the elves to help Adar find Sauron.
Take him out.
Waldreg then orders him to swear allegiance to Adar, the Lord Father of the Orcs.
Yes.
Sauron kneels and speaks the words of allegiance, but he also utters magical words, arranging for Waldreg to be devoured by his own warg. As soon as Sauron regains his freedom, Waldreg meets his grisly fate. In Lindon, the High King Gil-galad accepts the fate of the elves. Gathering all of his people, he declares that the elves' time in Middle-earth is coming to an end.
Our days in Middle-earth.
Just then, Kildan arrives with the 3 rings, 2 in his hand and 1 on his finger. Elrond watches with deep concern as both Galadriel and Gil-galad place the rings on their fingers. Immediately, their tree of life begins to heal, its leaves growing and sunny skies spread across Middle-earth. An intangible sense of peace envelopes the elves, as if affirming that they made the right decision by wearing the rings. Most of the elves feel their vitality restored. As they say, there is balance in 3, and together they form a triangle of power. As Celebrimbor admires his newly forged rings, a messenger from the Southlands arrives.
But a messenger has just arrived.
Though Celebrimbor does not realize it yet, this visit bodes ill. It is Sauron who has come to negotiate. Celebrimbor, knowing him as Halbrand, remains unaware of his true identity as Sauron. Meanwhile, in Mordor, after the eruption of Mount Doom during the final battle in the Southlands caused by Adar in Season 1, the aftershocks ripple across Middle-earth, even reaching Khazad-dûm. In the Dwarven kingdom within the mountain, the dwarves use sunlight reflected into their underground home to grow crops. Durin and Dissa are learning to live with limited resources, especially now that Durin has been disowned by his father and lost his princely status. Durin, no longer a royal, must watch his spending. As he and Dissa argue over whether he should reconcile with his father, disaster strikes. The aftershocks from Mount Doom seal the sun shafts that provide light for their crops and sustain life underground. Short of a full tunnel collapse, this is the worst possible outcome for the dwarves. Far away, Galadriel plants elvish seeds in memory of her deceased brother. Celebrimbor visits her with disturbing news. Sauron has returned.
I've had an unexpected visitor.
Celebrimbor claims that the seeds Galadriel planted are leading to their destruction, transforming into a harrowing vision of death.
You planted it.
This illusion is not real but a product of the ring's power, bringing terrifying visions to Galadriel. Meanwhile, Gil-galad convenes the council to discuss plans for invading Sauron's stronghold in the Southlands. Galadriel tries to warn Gil-galad that Celebrimbor may be in danger, but he dismisses her concerns, assuring her that there's no way Sauron could reach him.
Rest assured.
However, Gil-galad remains cautious around Galadriel, fearing she might still be vulnerable to Sauron's manipulation, as he once won her trust. Gil-galad too has been experiencing ominous visions since wearing his ring. After admitting to Galadriel that he's been plagued by visions of the unseen world, she asks permission to go to a region to save Celebrimbor. Gil-galad refuses, worried that her past connection with Sauron makes her susceptible to his influence. Galadriel pleads to at least be allowed to bring someone with her. Gil-galad can't imagine that a being as powerful as Sauron would disguise himself as a humble traveler, quietly waiting in a region to be invited in by Celebrimbor. Sauron, still in the guise of Halbrand, attempts to gain the trust of Merdania, Celebrimbor's assistant. Although Celebrimbor has promised to have nothing to do with Halbrand, promises are easily broken. Meanwhile, the sight of dead elven messengers suggests things are far from well in these lands. In western RhÂn, a death mask-clad tracker, last seen stalking the Easter and his Harfoot companions, arrives at Kara's Gaer. Inside, the Dark Wizard and his acolytes perform a ritual, releasing a jar filled with moths as they attend to a servant whose blood the Dark Wizard uses for summoning. One of the acolytes, the most powerful and fearsome of the 3 witches who were defeated by the Easter in the previous season, reports on her encounters with him. The Dark Wizard is furious with her failure and regrets wasting blood and magic to bring her back to life.
Is lost, vulnerable.
The Death Mask Tracker asks the Dark Wizard to heal the curse upon their skin, promising to capture the Easter by threatening the lives of his Harfoot friends. Speaking of the Easter and his Harfoot companions, they are still journeying in search of the stars. The Easter struggles to remember his name, and Nori tries to offer suggestions, though he dislikes them. Poppy finds a shortcut, but the Easter warns that it might lead them to run out of water and die in the heat. Still, every path seems fraught with danger, especially as the trackers close in on them. At one point, the trackers get dangerously close, but are distracted by a snake, which they swiftly kill before moving on. Realizing they won't be safe anywhere, the Easter and his companions decide to take the shortcut through the desert. Back in Khazad-dûm, the dwarves grow desperate after the closure of the sunlight shafts. Their crops have withered and food is scarce within the mountain walls. Disa leads a group of stone singers in an attempt to save the kingdom from the grip of darkness.
Disa?
However, their efforts are in vain as the few remaining shafts of light collapse during the process. King Durin realizes that whatever is causing this catastrophe is far greater than they anticipated. After the session, the king summons Disa for a private audience. She urges him to reconcile with his son, but the king stubbornly refuses to be the one to apologize.
Why should it be me who apologizes?
Disa, frustrated, accuses him of being as stubborn as his son and advises him to act like a father and talk to him. Speaking of Durin's stubborn son, Durin's efforts are also futile. His band of miners reaches a dead end, and they mock him for his perceived softness. Though humiliated, Durin doesn't blame his subjects for the kingdom's troubles. Despite being disowned by his father, he too feels unwilling to apologize. He believes they will find a way out of the crisis, but the question remains, how? Meanwhile, Galadriel meets with Elrond, informing him that the High King wouldn't allow her to go to a region without him. Together, they need to ensure Celebrimbor and his city are safe. However, Elrond shares Gil-galad's doubts about Galadriel's past friendship with the person she did not know was Sauron. Elrond takes his mistrust further, expressing concern about the three elves who now wear the rings. He rejects her proposal. Later, after meeting with Kildan, Elrond discusses the mistrust surrounding the rings. Kildan reassures him that it's natural to fear the power of the rings but insists they are in good hands. He demonstrates how the rings can harmonize with nature when used for good. Kildan advises Elrond to guide the ring-bearers, helping them avoid being blinded by the darkness.
The ways it can be used for good.
In the wastelands of Rhûn, the Easter has been dragging his smaller companions behind him before collapsing from exhaustion. Fortunately, they find a well nearby. Nori and Poppy drag him to it and Poppy fetches water.
Hurry, Poppy!
However, the well is connected to a bell, which attracts the trackers shortly after the Easter regains consciousness.
Quick, goats, you're alive!
The Easter finds a staff resembling the one from his dreams just as the trackers arrive. After a brief confrontation, a battle ensues.
We were just having a drink of water.
Initially, the staff proves to be a powerful defense, summoning a storm. But the storm quickly spirals out of control, destroying the staff and scattering the Harfoots to parts unknown. While they are likely not dead, their fate remains uncertain. In a region, a different sort of trouble unfolds in Celebrimbor's forge. He has created something new using a slice of mithril, but he has left Sauron, known to him as Halbrand, waiting outside. After a long day spent in the rain, Halbrand's patience pays off when Celebrimbor comes to send him away. The mistake Celebrimbor makes is allowing Halbrand to speak. As always, Halbrand uses his persuasive charm. He lies, claiming he recently spoke to Galadriel and that the rings are functioning perfectly. He feigns confusion, wondering why Celebrimbor wasn't informed of his own hard work. Halbrand then manipulates the conversation, suggesting that the High King has failed to appreciate Celebrimbor's achievements. Flattered by Halbrand's words, Celebrimbor, eager to celebrate his newfound success, retrieves the oldest bottle of wine he had saved for a special occasion. Sensing his influence over Celebrimbor growing, Halbrand makes a bold suggestion. He convinces him to forge the 7 rings of power for the dwarves. Of course, Celebrimbor is reluctant to accept the proposal immediately. That's when Halbrand reveals that he is not who he claims to be. He is neither Halbrand nor the king of the Southlands. Celebrimbor, stunned, asks who he truly is. Halbrand cryptically describes himself as a kind of angel sent to guide those wise enough to understand.
There are forces.
Celebrimbor, confused, struggles to believe any of this. Suddenly, thunder strikes and Halbrand vanishes. In his search for him, Celebrimbor accidentally shatters his bottle of wine. As he mourns the loss, the forge fire dims, only to blaze back to life. And Halbrand reappears within the flames, this time in the form of an elf. Awestruck, Celebrimbor instinctively bows, but Halbrand refuses, telling him they are partners and nothing more. He reveals his true identity, Anatar, the Lord of Gifts.
Lord of Gifts.
In Lindon, the High King finally permits Galadriel to go to a region to aid Celebrimbor, but only on the condition that Elrond accompanies her and commands the expedition. Galadriel is both surprised and disappointed. Meanwhile, in Khazad-dûm, Durin receives an invitation from Celebrimbor to visit a region, which also comes as a surprise. Previously, after the Númenorian soldiers lost the battle in the Southlands and witnessed Isildur's death, Beric, Isildur's loyal horse, refuses to return to Númenor without his master. Even Elendil, Isildur's father, is unable to persuade him to go, and reluctantly lets him be. Beric seems to sense that Isildur might still be alive. During his search, Beric encounters a group of hungry orcs but easily overcomes them. He ventures into the Black Forest, a place feared even by orcs, believing that nothing could survive there. However, Beric, being a wise horse, finds a cave. Inside, his instincts prove correct as he discovers Isildur bound in spider webs. Surrounded by large spiders, Isildur realizes his peril. Beric attempts to free him, but during the struggle, an orc awakens and tries to grab a sword. A fierce battle ensues, awakening a giant spider.
Beric, go!
The oak's head is crushed, and the spider attacks Isildur. As Isildur fights for his life, the tide turns, and with Beric's help, he manages to escape from the cave. In Númenor, Elendil pays his respects to the fallen king Tar-Palantir. However, his mind is troubled by the belief that his son Isildur has died in battle. His daughter also confronts him, blaming him for the loss. Amidst their argument, Queen Regent Miriel arrives with her cousin Pharazôn to honor her deceased father. Captain Elendil, who is the only one aware of Miriel's secret blindness during the Middle-earth battle, stands by her side. A grieving mother approaches Miriel, slapping her for losing her son in what she believes was a pointless war, implying that Númenor should not have been involved.
My son.
After Miriel retreats to her chambers, Pharazôn approaches her, suspecting something is amiss. Although Miriel hides a bangle behind her back, Pharazôn pretends to assist her with her coronation gown while secretly trying to confirm her blindness. Miriel chooses a white gown, the same as her father wore on his coronation day. Meanwhile, in a tavern, Pharazôn indulges in gossip and flattery from Lord Belzegar and his son Keeman. They insult Miriel's blindness and suggest Pharazôn would make a better leader. This enrages Isildur's friend Valandil, who confronts Keeman with veiled threats of violence. Valandil defends the Queen Regent, citing her efforts to save Eärion's brother Isildur. Though a fight is narrowly avoided, tensions remain high. As Eärien speaks of finding something secret and dangerous, Miriel discovers that the Palantir has gone missing. It's clear that many issues remain unresolved after the ale drinking ends. In Mordor, the orcs complain to their Lord Father Adar, expressing a desire to stay where they are, believing it to be safe. Adar tells them that he will notify them when they are truly safe, but for now, they must continue searching for Sauron and eliminate him. A new visitor arrives, summoned by Adar, Damrod, a hill troll from the Erd Mithrin. Adar notes that Damrod received his message and even killed the messenger orc. Damrod demands to know where to find Sauron. Meanwhile, Sauron, now in the guise of an elf and calling himself Anatar, and Celebrimbor meet with dwarves. They discuss a trade, Mithril from the dwarves in exchange for rings of power that will heal their mountain, akin to the way the 3 rings healed the elves' tree of life. Celebrimbor asks Durin to discuss these terms with his father, King Durin. Although Durin is skeptical and wonders if Elrond is aware of the situation, Sauron assures him that Elrond is informed of everything.
Exactly.
Feeling the tension, Dissa requests time to consider the proposal.
You've given us much to consider.
Celebrimbor agrees and the dwarves leave, divided in their opinions. Dissa tells her husband that the final decision will be made by King Durin, and if there is any chance of healing their mountain, they must seize it. Anatar, Sauron, feels time is running short, but Celebrimbor advises him to be patient. However, Sauron, ever the manipulator, decides to blackmail the High King by demanding the cessation of any further ring-making for the dwarves, deeming them unworthy. This forces Celebrimbor to send a deceptive message to the High King.
You would lie to your High King?
Informing him that the forge will be closing soon so he can join them in Lindon later. This buys them time to complete their mission without interruption. In Mordor, Isildur and Beric traverse a wasteland littered with corpses. Fortunately, Isildur finds a pair of boots that fit him. As they continue through the forest, Isildur stumbles upon a ruined campsite and is stabbed by Estrid, who mistakes him for an orc.
Sorry.
Alright, doesn't hurt.
Despite the pain, Isildur has never been stabbed before. Estrid provides him with some first aid, and together they decide to head toward Pelarkiri, an old Númenorian settlement in a seemingly peaceful valley. Finding nothing there, they move on. On their journey, they encounter a survivor of an orc attack. Feeling sympathy, Isildur tries to offer him food, but they are attacked by Adar's followers. Just as they are about to be overwhelmed, an arrow flies in and saves them. It is shot by Arondir, an elven soldier, who quickly eliminates the attackers. Isildur introduces himself to Arondir, who is already familiar with him.
It's Isildur.
Arondir directs them to follow him. Unfortunately, Bronwyn, Arondir's forbidden love, has died, leaving behind the troubled orphan Theo. That night, they hold a barrier ceremony where Arondir and Theo set the pile ablaze. Despite Arondir's efforts to comfort him, Theo remains deeply affected by his loss. Back in Khazad-dûm, King Durin faces the dual challenges of managing his kingdom through a crisis and addressing his son Durin's arrival with Celebrimbor's mithril for Ring's offer. It requires significant humility from Durin, but he also has the courage to suggest that the offer might not be beneficial. Despite his reservations, Durin ultimately accepts it. Theo has picked up some of his mother's healing skills. Arondir confides in Isildur about his failure to protect Theo's mother from Adar, though he believes there was nothing more he could have done. Theo, angry and resentful, resists Arondir's attempts to be a father figure.
He wasn't you.
Though he is more open to Isildur, who shows him Númenorian water structures. Theo offers to help Isildur retrieve his horse, Beric, from Adar's agents, suggesting they do so at night.
Tonight.
Meanwhile, Isildur meets Estrid, who reveals she is waiting for her betrothed. They share stories of guilt and lost parents around a campfire, while Theo listens sympathetically. Isildur admits that he blames himself for his mother's drowning while trying to save him at sea, and he is now seeking to repay what she did for him. After Theo and Isildur leave, Estrid burns the Adar sigil on her back, indicating she took it for survival. In the forest, Adar's servants camp and cut down trees. Isildur sneaks in to free his horse but is heard by someone.
Someone's out there.
Theo tries to distract the wild men by showing them Adar's sigil on his hand, claiming he is one of them.
I serve Adar.
Although the sigil does not match theirs, and they realize he is lying, chaos erupts when an axe strikes one of them. Theo runs wildly but is eventually captured by an unknown force, leaving Isildur shouting for him. Back in Númenor, Miriel's coronation is underway. She wears the white gown chosen earlier, but the event begins poorly when a grieving subject heckles her, calling her the Queen of Lies before the swearing in.
Queen of Lies!
Miriel delivers a stirring speech that wins over the skeptical audience, rallying them to their cause. Suddenly, Eärien arrives with the Palantir, calling it an elvish magical artifact and accusing Miriel of using it to make decisions.
Stone is your queen!
Pharazôn seizes the opportunity to cast doubt on Miriel's right to rule and orders the destruction of the Palantir.
No!
Miriel refuses, and when Elendil touches it, it magically sends him sprawling to the ground. This causes chaos, and people begin to turn against the queen, accusing her of witchcraft. Just as Pharazôn is poised to take advantage of the situation, a giant eagle arrives, which is seen as a good omen, reminiscent of the eagle that honored Tar Palantir's ascent years earlier. This sways public opinion, and Pharazôn is supported as the new king. Meanwhile, in Eregion, the forging of the human and dwarven rings of power is in progress, with Sauron assisting Celebrimbor. King Durin personally delivers the mithril. Although Celebrimbor intended to incorporate it himself, Sauron requests to handle the addition of the mithril, infusing it with some of his own power. In Lindon, Galadriel tries to catch up with her friend Elrond, who has been appointed commander of their fleet. Elrond asks if she can provide any skilled archers or swordsmen for their expedition to Eregion.
Commander.
As they journey through the forests and mountains of Lindon, they find that the bridge they need to cross has been destroyed. Galadriel realizes that Sauron is deliberately trying to impede their progress. They consider alternative routes, but Galadriel's ring shows a vision of evil if they head south. Heading north would take an additional 2 weeks. Despite this, Elrond chooses the southern route, much to Galadriel's frustration.
We go south.
Elrond, angered, dismisses Galadriel's ring's warning, while Galadriel reluctantly agrees to follow his lead, hoping to avoid further casualties. In Rhûn, the Easter is preoccupied with the loss of his Harfoot friends. He follows a goat to a location where he unexpectedly encounters a man who seems to have been waiting for him.
See, you found the goat.
Although the Easter doesn't understand why he's there, he continues searching for his Harfoot friends. His map slips from his hands and lands on a tree branch, which resembles one from his dreams. As he tries to retrieve it, he is swallowed by the tree to which the branch is attached. Nothing seems to be going his way. Fortunately, Nori and Poppy survive the intense storm that whisked them away. They wake up in an unfamiliar place, but they are still being pursued. They jump off a cliff and find a halfling who calls himself Nobody. Despite his resemblance to a Harfoot, he claims to know nothing about them and introduces himself as Merrimack.
My mum calls me Merrimack.
He gives Nori and Poppy a meaningful look before fleeing. When they press him for information, he tells them that outsiders are not allowed in his village and outlines 3 rules they must follow. Nori and Poppy arrive at the village, astonished to find Harfoots living there.
Living in homes.
The village elder, known as the Gund, informs them that they are not Harfoots but Stour halflings. She accuses Merrimack of letting strangers into their home and demands to know why she should host them. Nori, providing a fabricated reason about having traveled the world, mentions a giant wizard friend.
He's a wizard.
The Gund mistakes this for referring to the Dark Wizard and has them arrested. Meanwhile, the Dark Wizard expresses frustration at not yet having captured the Easter. He reprimands the chief of the riders and directs him to focus solely on the Harfoots, leaving the Easter to the Dark Wizard himself. Returning to the Easter, we find him being swallowed by the tree. Tom Bombadil, the man he met earlier, comes to his rescue.
Who are you?
Folk used to call me Bombadil.
The Easter enjoys his first decent bath while Bombadil repairs his rope. Bombadil's use of magic surprises the Easter, who wonders about his identity. Bombadil claims to be the oldest being, existing before the stars, seas, and mountains. His display of magic, even causing the fire to react to his yawning, fascinates the Easter. The Easter asks Bombadil to teach him to control magic.
Can you teach it to me?
But Bombadil replies that magic is his to wield, and the Easter will master it in time. Their conversation is interrupted by intruders.
We're not alone.
And Bombadil explains that the Dark Wizard is pursuing the Easter, seeking power to join forces with Sauron to conquer Middle-earth. Bombadil states that while he is just a wanderer, it is the Easter's duty to stop both the Dark Wizard and Sauron.
It's to face them both.
Elsewhere, Elrond and his team travel the southern route to a region, passing through a graveyard for deceased kings. Although they assume the tombs are undisturbed, one of the members hears something unusual but lies to Galadriel, claiming he merely remembered a song.
Memory of a song.
They soon find the bodies of messengers who were sent to a region from Lindon.
From Lindon.
As chains strike them, pulling one of their own into a cave tomb, they realize it's time to draw their weapons. They are confronted by Barrow Wights, evil skeletons resistant to their attacks.
Prepare.
Galadriel and her team fight bravely, but the Barrow Wights seem numerous. Elrond improvises with their weapons to combat them. Galadriel concludes that Sauron is behind the awakening of this evil.
Someone.
Meanwhile, the hunt for Theo continues after the mysterious attackers kidnapped him and the other wild men. Arondir notices flower petals on the ground and finds the wild men's axes. He then discovers the corpses of some wild men. Panic spreads among the others who want to go to war, but Isildur and Arondir hold out hope. Following Estrid's suggestion, they decide to head north. Isildur and Estrid share a meaningful moment by a fountain, but it is cut short when Arondir questions her about a wound on her neck, revealing it as an attempt to conceal Adar's mark. This revelation complicates Isildur and Estrid's budding relationship but offers a clue for Theo's search. As Isildur and Estrid argue,
I died in Mordor.
Arondir stumbles upon another clue, the same flower petals. He concludes that Theo wasn't taken by the wild men but is instead held up in the trees, though the specifics remain unknown.
Don't know yet.
Meanwhile, Arondir and his team search for Theo in a swampy area.
Easier to balance if I had you.
Estrid tries to persuade Arondir to release her.
It's all right.
Unfortunately, Isildur falls into a pit of mud and begins to be devoured. Arondir attempts to rescue him but is also pulled in. Estrid, confused but determined, uses a supporting branch to help. A giant mud-dwelling worm attacks her, but Arondir manages to dispatch it from the inside out, providing them with a meal.
That we shall call supper.
Back at the Stour village, the Harfoot visitors face the threat of exile. However, Nori mentions Sadoc Burrows, their former leader, which prompts a reaction from the Gund, the village elder. She recalls an old legend about a Stour who set out to find a promised land called the Suza and promised to return. Nori realizes this might explain why her people are perpetual wanderers who have forgotten their original quest.
Kept wandering.
Their discussion is interrupted by the arrival of riders. Despite the threat of violence,
The pleasure.
the Gund refuses to expel the visitors, though the masked trackers threaten to return with the Dark Wizard himself.
The selves.
On the southern route to a region, Galadriel and Elrond continue to disagree over the use of the ring. Although Galadriel's ring offers grim visions, both she and Elrond agree that defeating Sauron is their top priority. Their conversation becomes intense until a third elf arrives with alarming news: the sound of drums. In Theo's search, Arondir and Isildur thank Estrad for saving them. After a brief moment, she fears being cast out by her people for associating with Adar and grabs Isildur's sword. Isildur promises to protect her, even though Arondir is prepared to confront her. Suddenly, they are interrupted by Ents, talking trees that are angry with humans for cutting down their trees. The Ents see anyone with a weapon as an enemy. Isildur explains that their weapons are meant for fighting orcs, not trees. Winterbloom, an Ent with flowers, seems unsettled but eventually forgives them and provides a token flower. The Ents reveal that they have existed in the forest since before the mountains rose. After freeing Theo and the other wild men, Isildur tries to show affection to Estrad, but her betrothed arrives, turning Isildur's good day into a conflict. The Ents move on and Theo thanks Arondir for rescuing him. Arondir, proud of earning Theo's gratitude, resolves to follow the trail of the orcs. As the orcs march toward a region in search of Sauron, Galadriel and her team notice their trail after hearing the drums. The orcs shoot arrows at a horse, accidentally hitting an elf on Galadriel's team. Galadriel uses the ring to heal the injured elf, which softens Elrond's view of the ring. She hands it to him for safekeeping while she confronts the orcs. A battle ensues, allowing Elrond and the other elves to retreat to Lindon for reinforcements. Galadriel is eventually overpowered by Adar himself. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe to our channel if you haven't and let us know where you're watching from in the comments section. Your support is greatly appreciated, my dear friend. Feel free to click on the next video. Thank you.